The world says numbers, 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 tangible results, measurable scores of success. Even in Christian circles, more is seen as spiritual. But God's word says in Habakkuk 3:17 and 18, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. Today, in episode 16 of the podcast, author Casey Ireton and I have a very honest discussion about the clash between the world's determination of success and God's, and our responsibility in all of it. Listen in. Welcome to the Unperfect Podcast. I'm your host, Shelley Sneed, and I'm here to help you see glimpses of God's glory among life's imperfections. If you've ever struggled with measuring up to an unattainable standard or wondered where is God during less than perfect circumstances, you're not alone. Hope and probably a bit of humor are coming up. So today I have Casey Ireton. She and her husband have 4 teenage children. They live in the Pacific Northwest. And even if she wasn't an author of several books, she would already have my mad respect because she's raising 4 teenagers here in 2023. But she's also written 2 nonfiction books, The Circle of Seasons, Meeting God in the Church Year, which sounds very fascinating to me. I'm looking forward to reading that one. Cracking Up, a postpartum faith crisis. 1 ebook, Anxious and More, 8 Habits for a Happy Life. And she's written hundreds of essays and articles and blog posts, but she's just released her first fiction book entitled A Yellow Wood and Other Stories. So welcome to the Unperfect Podcast, Kimberly.
Thanks, Shelley. It's great to be here. I appreciate that you're having me on your show.
I'm glad to be able to have this conversation with you. So I'm just going to jump right in. Like me and probably all of my listeners, you have had some moments of, well, that didn't go according to plan, or wondering what God is up to. So when I heard a little bit of your story, that theme just really resonated with me. So I knew I would enjoy having this conversation with you here on the podcast. But we're going to kind of start with right now, and we can work our way backwards, however the conversation takes us. Let's just start with your new book, A Yellow Wood and Other Stories. Can you tell us a little bit about it, what it's about, the story behind it, whatever you want to share with us?
Okay, sure. The Yellow Wood is the title story. It's actually almost a novella. It follows American college student Maggie, who is moved to England to help her grandmother clear out her great-grandmother's house. And while she's there, clearing out the attic, she finds this stash of sonnets, and she goes on this quest to figure out who wrote these sonnets and what happened to her. So that's the story. And of course, she finds friendship and love along the way. That's the main story in the collection. And then there are 4 other stories. And all of the stories are connected thematically by themes of kindness and love. So ordinary people living their ordinary lives and trying to do so with compassion. Or if they're not trying to do so with compassion, being kind of taken up in a moment of somebody else's kindness or their own recognition of their need to be kind. So that's the theme that connects all of the stories.
Yes, and I love that. And I really enjoyed all of them, especially the title, The Yellow Wood. It's just a sweet story of redemption, and I won't give it away by giving out any more details than that, but it's really, really sweet.
Thank you.
So what brought about this? You've written a lot of nonfiction on some pretty deep topics, just looking at what you've written. So what branched you out into the fiction world?
Oh, mercy. Okay, so I've been writing fiction my whole life. I wrote my first collection of short stories, Shelley, when I was 6 years old, and my parents went to my dad's office and photocopied them on his photocopy machine. And then I went home and I hand colored all of my little black and white illustrations that I had done. And then they put them in those, do you remember those Mylar covers, the plastic covers?
Yes.
The little clamshell spine, the little plastic clamshell spine. They put them in each copy of the story collection in a little plastic folder with the clamshell binding. And then they stuck them inside manila envelopes and mailed them to all our friends and relations. So this is my first taste of publication. And I think I do think that that's a big part of why I was like, I want to be an author when I grow up. I want it. And I also am a reader. I love to read. Fiction is my first love, both as a writer and as a reader. I sort of fell into writing nonfiction, which we'll talk about. I think we'll get into that a bit. So I fell into writing nonfiction. And so that's most of what I've been published in is nonfiction. But my first love has always been fiction. And about 5 years ago, maybe 6, I just realized the kinds of writing that I had been doing for my entire adult life, my entire professional life, I just wasn't really able to do it anymore. And I was like, what is going on? I even went back to grad school to try and figure out like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Because this whole writing thing is not working out. And then after my mom died, I was grieving and had no energy. I remember sitting on the deck that summer and just kind of staring up in the sky. And this story came to me and I started writing. And by December, I had a novel finished. So I was like, oh, maybe I can go back to writing fiction. So I did.
That is so neat. And I love that. I was just talking to another friend of mine who's a therapist about just the power of art and creativity, even like you were talking about grieving your mom.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a powerful way to cross our left and right brains and just process things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's so neat. So when did you know you wanted to be a writer? Does that go back to the 6-year-old Kimberly?
I think it goes back to the 6-year-old Kimberly. I've been writing my whole life. I don't remember a time when I wasn't writing. That collection of short stories is one of my earlier memories. So I don't remember a time when I wasn't writing. And all growing up, all through grade school, all through middle school, all through high school, all through college, I was writing. Didn't write a lot for publication. I was always very scared of showing my writing to other people. So it wasn't until I was in my late 20s, actually, that I started sending things out for publication. And my first piece was accepted for publication, like outside of like school magazines or whatever, was accepted for publication before I turned 30. So I was very happy that by my 30th birthday, I had something accepted for publication. But it was a long journey because like from 6 to 30 that's a lot of years.
That's right. That's right. Let's go back a little bit. Then tell me a little bit about how your first book, The Circle of Seasons, Meeting God in the Church Year, how did that come about?
Okay, so that came about by an act of God, I really do believe, because I had been writing for my church newsletter little pieces for the church year, like a piece on Advent and a piece on Lent. And then I think I did a piece on Ordinary Time. My first piece that got published, the one that I was just talking about that got accepted for publication before I was 30, that was about the Transfiguration. And so there's a Feast of Transfiguration, which takes place during Ordinary Time. And so between those three pieces, I had 3 pieces on the church year, maybe another one. I don't remember, but there were a few pieces I'd written about the church year. The woman who put together the church newsletter at that time, she was a writer and she had written several books for InterVarsity Press, and her editor at InterVarsity Press was looking for young writers. So she reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in writing a book. And I thought, well, I have these articles that I've written for the church newsletter on the church year. Could I turn those into a book? So she helped me write a book proposal and I got a book contract. Okay, this is unheard of. And anybody who spent any time around writers and any time in the publishing industry they know that you don't send one proposal to one editor and get a book contract. Like you just don't. It does not happen. Even I, naive as I was, knew that that was not normal. So I get this book contract for this book and I think I've got it made. My first book, I'm going to have a book published. I'm going to be a published author, just like I always wanted to be. This is awesome. And it like really with very little angst on my part. So I wrote the book. It came out in 2008. And it sold really poorly, like really poorly. And in January of 2010, so it came out in November of 2008 and January 2010, so like 14 months later, IVP sent me an email and they're just like, or a letter, I guess it was a letter. They sent me a letter. They're like, it's selling really poorly and we're going to pull it out of print. So now I have gone from being like a writer on my way to success and being like the writer I always dreamed of to now being a writer with a book that's pulled out of print. And I was super confused because I felt like God gave me this book contract. He gave me this opportunity to write this book. And then in my view, nothing happened with it. Like it didn't go anywhere. So that's the story behind it.
So how have you kind of come to grips with that now in your life? I know in my life, I kind of had, before I wanted to know the purpose for everything. As long as I knew there was a reason and I knew what the reason was, I can handle whatever. Mm-hmm. It's those times when I have no idea what that was for, but I got to figure out how to trust in the moment.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to tell one more story that kind of feeds along these same lines. So In 2009, so the book has been out for like 9 months at this point, my editor asked me to write a book proposal on a topic that IVP wanted a book on. So he asked me to write a proposal. So I put together a proposal, sent it in, and then he took it to the pub board and they came back and said no. And the part of the reason they said no was because my current book was selling really poorly, but also because I had no platform. And I think this might've been the first time I'd ever heard the term platform. And
Right.
I was like, so in 2007, when I got that book contract, I think I was the last writer on the planet to get a contract with no platform. And I'm not making, I mean, one of the,
no, you probably were.
One of the last.
All we hear now.
So, so they came back with a no. And so I was like, okay, I don't know what to do with this. This is not going the way I thought. And then the book came out of print in 2010. At the same time as all of this is happening, is I found out that I'm pregnant. And not only am I pregnant, I'm pregnant with twins. So I have twins in July of 2010. So, and in the midst of, and then I haven't slept. Like I had a difficult pregnancy, so I wasn't sleeping. And then of course, having twin babies is like nothing you've ever been through. I don't know how people do it with triplets. I know people who have triplets. I'm like, I don't know how you lived. I really don't, because twins was hard enough.
Right.
I almost didn't. I thought I was dying. I had so many health issues and mental health issues from the lack of sleep that I thought I was dying. So that's happening at the same time as all of this drama in my writing life. So fast forward 2 years, it's now 2012. And I had been blogging at my editor's suggestion, try and build up a platform, start a blog. So I'd been blogging all through the twin, like from like 2009 on, I'd been blogging. So it's now 2012. And I was standing in church and we were singing. I don't remember the song, but I remember where I was standing. I can see everything around me perfectly. And I had this full body sense of, you need to write the story of the first year of the twins' life, and you need to write it now. And I'm like, Shelley, I can count on one hand the number of times where I have felt the voice of God, like giving me a direct order. God doesn't tend to work that way in my life. He speaks to me in other ways. That sort of direct order is very, very rare. And I was like, okay, I can do that. I don't know how I did it. I had, at the time I had an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old and twin 2-year-olds. And I managed to write a book. I don't know how, it's honestly act of God. This is the only way I can explain this, because looking back, I'm like, I don't know how I did that. Even like a year later, I didn't know how I did it, but I did it. And I thought, great, I've written this book, it's being published. And God asked me to write this book. So I just knew that this was like, all right, here we go. The first one was practice. This is the real thing. Like, this is the way, this is like, I'm on my way now. And my writing life, my professional career is just going to take me to the next level. It did take me to the next level, Shelley. The next level was down, because that book sold even more poorly than The Circle of Seasons. And I was like, it's now out of print. I was like, what just happened? I don't understand. 2 books that I really feel like God called me to write, and nothing, in my view, nothing. So that led to a lot of soul searching. What I came to realize over the course of many years, and what I still come to realize because it's an ongoing issue, is that I was really fixated on the outcomes. I was really fixated on what was going to happen as a result of the things that I was doing. I thought that because I was being obedient, I was going to get some kind of physical, material reward. And that's just not the way that things work. And God really, really, really was trying to get me to rest my fingers off of those outcomes and to be willing to be obedient and to be faithful and to do the work that He has called me to do, simply because He has called me to do it, even if the outcomes that I want are not the outcomes that I get. And took me a lot of years to even realize that was what was going on. And it wasn't just in my writing life. It was in so many different areas of my life, this like clinging onto the outcome that I wanted and wanting to make it happen and to make other people even do the things that I wanted them to do. And just God just gently prying my fingers off of all of these things and saying, that's not your job. It is not your job to make that happen. That is not your job. I have called you to do this work at this time, and the results are not up to you. That's not what you get to control. And so that it has increased my faith. I will say that, because I have to trust that when God calls me to do something, I'm just supposed to do it. And I can't judge whether or not I was being obedient by the outcome. And that's hard because we're so outcome driven in our culture. If it turns out well, we did the right thing. If it turns out badly, shame on us. And that's not the way the kingdom of God works. You look at Jesus, like ignominious death on a cross. Shame on him? Really? No, we can't judge it by the outcomes.
Yeah. And that is so true. And I was thinking, I think we think when God's called us to do something, it's going to be like these Billy Graham proportions of numbers. But yet, who does Jesus mention when he's talking about faithfulness in the Bible? He says the widow, when he's talking about the widow who gave everything, we don't even get her name. And he could have said her name. Like, I just think, to me, that was kind of such a, like God saying, yeah, just because I've called you to do something doesn't mean it's going to be that instant success by the world's standards.
Exactly.
And I remember being at a writers conference, and I was just getting started with blogging. I hadn't even started the podcast. I remember one of the workshop leaders said, would you be okay if all of the things you're writing, you're doing, so this could be related to whatever ministry anyone has out there. It doesn't just have to be writing. But would you be okay if only one person was impacted? And my initial response was not very spiritual. I was like, no, this takes a lot of time. This takes a lot of money. I mean, you and I both know, just figuring out the technology to work on a website at our age, I don't know. But just that whole, I had to come to grips with, okay, God, if you're calling me to do stuff, to do this, it's kind of what you were just talking about. Am I willing to surrender the control of the outcome, the numbers, whatever? Faithfulness is my job. That's what he's called me to do. The fruitfulness is his. That's
such a great way to put it. I love that.
I would like to say that I made that up, but I'm pretty sure I wrote it down somewhere. Sometime someone else said it. But, and my husband, we were talking about this last night, and he says this quote. He says he uses this a lot at work. He's in a ministry also, but he says, God will not do what the farmer should do, but the farmer can't do what only God can do. That made me think of what you said about, this is what I'm responsible for, and he's responsible for the growth. But that is so hard because that's so countercultural to what the world says. And even in Christian circles, even in the church, I mean, we look at how many baptisms were there, how many, and I get that numbers can matter and can encourage and that kind of thing, but it does really it kind of takes a little bit of the edge off of our just faithful obedience without worrying about all of that.
Yeah.
Which is very hard to keep.
It is very hard to keep. One of my favorite books is called The Scent of Water. It's by Elizabeth Goudge, who was a mid-20th century English writer. And she has this, in the book, there's a blind poet, and he's reflecting on his writing life. And in one of my favorite passages, he says something along the lines, or he's reflecting something along the lines of, it seemed to him the power that bid men act required of them only obedience and a maximum of effort, and to remain curiously indifferent as to results. And I just,
wow.
I keep that very close when I'm writing, because I'm like, do my best and I have to be obedient, but the results, those aren't my problem. It's not my circus. I'm not my monkeys. And I just can't go around counting them. Right. And
I love that phrase, the curious indifference. Yes. Like that's just, it's just so lighthearted to work.
It is. And it's also, and it's difficult because that curious indifference is just, we just have to be willing to give it back up. Like, and again, I'm not saying that tracking numbers is bad. I track numbers, but I try really hard to limit the number of times I track numbers. I'm not obsessively checking the numbers every hour or even every day. And so just trying to keep that in perspective, because we do, I need to make money in order to continue writing. I don't write in order to make money, but I do have to make some money in order to continue the writing, because it is expensive. It costs money. There are things that we have to pay for, and we do need some kind of income to be able to offset that, and also to be compensated for our time, because there's a million other things I could be doing right now that I'm not doing because I'm doing this. So that's always that tension between, but just remember to keep first things first. Like, I'm not here to make money. I'm not here to grow my platform. That's not my goal. My goal is faithful obedience to God. Those things might be a byproduct of it, and they might not. But my job is to listen to God. And if I need to be doing something different, to trust that he's going to let me know that what that is and when that is, which is hard. It is a hard thing to continue to trust, because we have faulty hearing and we don't always hear correctly. And so I think that he is ultimately trustworthy, but I don't always trust my hearing.
And I love when you were talking about that you were so sure that God called you to write that book and hearing his voice. I remember there was a time when Art and I moved across the country. And I mean, it was a crazy move. So we were planning this move or we were contemplating it. And it was a total change in job for my husband, but something he wanted to get into. But we were born and raised in the Southeast, and this was moving us all the way to New Mexico. We had no family out there. We had a child who had a trach and a feeding tube and was on oxygen, and there was a shortage of medical personnel in New Mexico. Like, there were lots of reasons not to, but God just kept putting, sign after sign after sign. Like, when we packed up the U-Hauls and headed, there was no doubt in our minds it was the right thing. Those were the hardest 3 years we probably had ever had. Like, it was just hard. Like, my husband's job was hard. Situations were hard. Our son's medical, like, we can doubt a lot of things, but we can't doubt that we're supposed to be here. And that was such an encouragement.
Yes, for sure. When you know that you're doing the right thing and that you're doing, then that just makes it, that allays some of the doubts, right? That you would have otherwise.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh, did I do the wrong thing? Am I not supposed to be here? When it is that hard, then I think it's very helpful to be like, no, we are being obedient. And the hardship is one of the things that happens when you're obedient. Sometimes it's hard. God doesn't promise us that we're going to get everything that we want or that it's going to be easy, right? The road is difficult.
Yeah. And somebody said, don't forget in the dark what God told you in the light. So we've mentioned platform on here. And just for those who are listening that aren't in the writing world or creatives, maybe it's lots of different areas that use platform. That's like the gauge of your followers, or, how long your email list is, because a publisher does want to look at that and see, how many, if I give them this contract, how many books can they sell? Well, if they only have 20 people that are listening to her podcast, then she's probably only going to sell 20 books. You and I met this summer in a course that we did called Writing Off Social, which was fabulous. But one of the things that God really said to me during that course, because I was on the verge, I was just right on the edge. Like, I want to get off social media. I'm still battling with, is that the right thing? And I just remember when I got just really close, God kind of saying to me, Shelley, do you really think that I, the creator of the world, the designer of the universe, need Facebook to accomplish what I want to accomplish? Like, do you really think I can't get your message to who needs to hear it? That for me, it's kind of along those same lines of just letting go of that control, whatever ministry God's given us. And we just feel like we have to do it the world's way. You were saying, have our hands in it. Y'all can't see us because we're looking at each other on a video, but we're both like doing these hand motions where we're trying to pry our hand off of the thing that we want to control. It is, he just made it so clear. He's able to do immeasurably more than all I can ask or imagine, that he's the one that makes things grow, that his word doesn't return void. I mean, his word is full of reasons for us not to even worry about outcomes, not to worry about whatever he's called me to do. It's going to do what he wants. Like, I wish I could say that's just, I'm at peace and rest all the time at whatever I'm doing. But even with raising kids, I'm not.
Right.
I talk about that on here a lot too. It's just, I say, oh God, they're yours, but I'm also like, but I need to do this, and this, and I need this outcome, so I'll know I did a good job.
Right.
And yeah.
Yes, it is hard. And parenting is another way, like where we pour out ourselves, we do the best we can, and we really don't. And I think even more so with kids, because they are autonomous beings, right? They have wheels of their own in a way that a book doesn't. And so
we really don't have control.
And so you do the best you can. And like, you just have, we just don't have control of outcomes. And am I going to be willing to write for the small audience that I have, or I'm going to just turn around and pout because I don't have a bigger one? Like, that's always been the question that I felt like God is asking, like, will you be faithful with what I have given you? Will you be faithful to these people? And I've often thought of like pastors of small churches, right? Do I think it's a waste of their time to minister to 30 people or 50 people Do I think it's a waste of their time to spend 10 or 15
Right.
hours preparing a sermon that 30 people are going to hear? No, absolutely not. I do not think that's a waste of their time. So why would I think it's a waste of my time to spend 5 hours writing a blog post that 200 people are going to read? It's the same equation. And that's part of one of the gifts of being small too, is that you can have more relationships. I have relationships with a lot of my readers, whereas I know that people who are really big and have giant audiences, they just can't. That's not possible. Right. And I'm very grateful that I don't feel the guilt of that, because I think I would, just knowing myself. I'm like, God knows me so well. And he knows that I would be like, oh, all these people who want something from me and I just can't give it to them. Like, that would be really hard for me. It's already hard for me because I can't give, the people I already know all of the things that I would like to be able to give them. So I think that that's one of the gifts of smallness too. And being able to say, no, this is good. Being right here, right where I am.
And like you're saying, doing it well. I think of the talents I think I've talked about this on the podcast before too. But when God gave his servants, that story used to really frustrate me, because I just thought, that poor little servant that buried his one talent, like, why is he getting so much grief? But whatever he gave to each person, he expects them to do faithfully and with all their heart, and multiply, and not multiply like you go out and get the numbers, but like you invest it in other people. Right. You invest your life in other people. And that's just always a great reminder. I may be in a 1 talent season. I may be in a 2 talent season. Whatever it is, I want to be faithful with what he's given me, and not just wish I had what she has, right, or what the talents he's given someone else.
Right. So. Well, the other story that I often think of along those lines is when Jesus talks about the good shepherd who leaves the 99 to go in pursuit of the one. And that goes back to what you were saying earlier about the person who said, if you only reached 1 reader, would you still do this work? It's like, I hope so. I will. I don't know. I have more than 1 reader, and I don't know if I would still do this work for 1 reader, but I hope that I would. I hope that I would be as much like Jesus as the good shepherd to be able to do all of this work for 1 person. I still remember when my memoir, Cracking Up, came out, and a woman who lived, I don't even know how she managed to get a hold of a copy of my book. She was a missionary wife in, I don't know, somewhere in Southeast Asia or Indonesia, somewhere around there. And she reached out to me via email, and basically she said, oh my goodness. And she just named like parallel after parallel after parallel between our stories, and even down to the psalm that God gave me to say to, in the midst of the dark night of the soul that I went through after the twins were born, when I thought the whole world was ending, right down to that psalm was parallel. And she's like, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for your book. And I'm like, maybe she's the reason God had me write this book right now. It was because she needed it.
Right.
And would that have been, can I consider that was wasted? I can't consider that was wasted.
Right. That is beautiful. And I'm so glad you got to hear that, because I think a lot of times too, we don't even know what.
We have no idea.
Whether we're praying with someone in Publix or in the grocery store, or we're, we don't know the impact of our words. So I love that. Okay, so I do have one question that I like to ask all my guests, and it's so funny. I was at lunch with a friend today, and she listens to the podcast, and she said, so what's your answer to that? And I was like, actually, I don't know. I have not come up with the answer yet, but hopefully you'll do better than me. So the question I like to ask, because we're all hanging out in this unperfect space of following Jesus here in the now and the not yet, where things aren't perfect quite yet. So if you could hang out with your younger self, what words would you encourage her with?
This is a really good question, Shelley, and I have listened to your podcast, so I have heard you ask other people this question. And so I was prepared for it, but I still don't know exactly what. I feel like I should go back to my younger writing self and tell her something, but I honestly don't know what I would tell her that would not discourage her. I think given who I was at that time, I think being able to say, you know what, faithfulness is worth it. Just be faithful no matter what happens. She would have been like, what are you talking about? And she wouldn't have known what to do with that. So I think what I would do is I'd probably go back to my young mom self, and maybe the self that I was in 2010 after my twins were born. And I was just so mentally ill. I mean, there's no other word for it. It was so hard. And I would give her a hug, and I would just tell her, you know what, I know you feel alone right now. And I know you feel like God's abandoned you, but I just want to tell you that he hasn't. And in 6 months, and certainly in a year, and even more in 10 years, you are going to look back on this and see the hand of God every step of the way. I know you can't see it now, but I just want to tell you that. So I think that's what I would do.
And that's good even for us to reflect now and look back on the hand of God in different parts of our life where we certainly didn't see it at the moment. Mm-hmm. So I have to say, because when you started out, you were saying it would have been hard for me to listen to that. When I was with my friend Jody at lunch today, I said, I don't know that there's anything I could tell my younger self, because my younger self thought she knew everything. So I don't think I'd have listened anyway. If I had that opportunity, it would have been wasted. So yeah, I love that. Okay, so Kimberly, tell the listeners where they can find you.
Okay.
And I'll put a link to your book.
Okay.
A Yellowwood and Other Stories, which is your newest book, which I've really thoroughly enjoyed reading. But tell us where they can find you.
Well, Shelley,
on the internet.
Like you, I am not on social media. I actually have not been on social media since 2020. It's been over 3 years since I was my last social media post.
Wow.
And so you can really only find me on my website, kcireton.com. And then I'm also over on Patreon at patreon.com/kcireton. So those would be the two places that you can find me on the internet. If you go to my website right now, and on the homepage, there's a place where you can fill out, put in your email address, and then I will email you the first 2 chapters of A Yellowwood. And then you can get like a teaser trailer, decide if you, I do like this story, I do want to read it, or like, nope, not my style.
Yes, y'all definitely do that. Number 1, because it's really good. And number 2, because you're also going to want to see what happens after chapter 2. But definitely do that. That is great. Thank you so much for offering that, Kimberly. Yeah, well, it was such a joy to connect with you today. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on the Unperfect podcast.
Shelley, thank you so much for having me. It was just a delight to talk to you. Always glad to talk to kindred spirits.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick rating and review. It only takes a second, and it helps other unperfect people like us find the podcast so they can be encouraged too. As always, I'm praying you have a blessed week and are able to see glimpses of glory in the now and the not yet of your unperfect life. See you next time. If you sometimes struggle with living in the tension of the now and the not yet, I've got a free resource just for you called The Unperfect Promises of God. It's a printable download of 5 biblical meditations to help you find balance between the brokenness we live in and the hope that we have in Jesus. Just click on the link in the show notes and that printable download is yours free. Yay, we love free.